We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara, Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 18b. On the previous Amud, Rabbi Bar Chanan asked Abaya that it turns out by this case of Nida, let's say a person is in the middle of having relations with a woman who's Tahora, and then she says that she is a Nida, so there's a halacha again that the person is not allowed to exit the act of relations immediately. He has to wait till the aver becomes soft. And so Rabbi Bar Chanan says to Abaya, if that's the case, it turns out we have here a case very similar to what we have when somebody becomes Tameh in the Azara, that he has to leave the shortest possible route. He can't go the longer route. So here it's the opposite, but the same basic idea. He has to take a little more time to exit. He can't exit immediately. And so now Rabbi Bar Chanan finishes his question. Va'anon b'mikdash nan. We had that kind of idea by the Beis HaMikdash becoming Tameh in the Azara. And as Rashi explains, Va'anon b'mikdash tanan v'havalei lemisni nami b'nida b'hada. We should have put nida next to that and shown that that's basically the same case. We should have shown how those two cases are similar. And the Gemara continues and answers, Ella, but rather the reason we don't do that is mishum delo dami, because they're not exactly the same. Arucha dahacha kitsara dahasam, arucha dahasam kitsara dahacha. The longer way over here is like the shorter one over there. The longer way over there is like the shorter one over here, meaning over here it's actually reversed. Again, by the case of the Nida, he has to take the quote-unquote longer way. He's supposed to wait. That's exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you become Tameh in the Azara. Rashi says, Umeshani mishum delo damu. It's not similar to Harucha dahacha pater, because here the longer way is pater, kiktsara dahasam, like the shorter way over there by the case of the Mikdash. And the same the other way, kiktsara dahacha chayev, the shorter way here is chayev, karucha dahasam, like the longer way over there. And the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Rav Huna bereider Rav Nasan. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nasan, asked the following question: Umi Amar Abaya onesu. Did Abaya really say that in a situation where the person withdraws, this is what Abaya said on the previous Amud, that if a person withdraws and he does wait until the aver becomes soft, so it's considered like the whole thing is an onus, it's an accident, and then he's exempt. But then we see from there, B'shalo samuch levesto kamrinan, that Abaya must understand the Mishnah that it's not near the time of the period. But the problem with that is, Abaya Damar, but Abaya said earlier in terms of the Mishnah, Chayev Shtayim, that the person actually is liable for two karbanos, Alma B'samach Levest Askin. And so we see that Abaya understands the Mishnah is talking where it is near the time of her period. And the Gemara answers to that, Ki Itmar di Abaya, when Abaya made that statement, Bi Alma Itmar, that was made in general, it wasn't going on the Mishnah. And Rashi explains, Alma B'shalo Samach Levest, again, if Abaya is going to consider the person to be an onus, we must be talking not near the time of the period. Kai, that's what we must be talking. Masnisin, meaning in our Mishnah. The ibis samach levesta, because if we're talking about samach levesta when it's the time of her period, v'shagag, and then so therefore when he initially had relations with her, that's considered shogeg. That's a mistake. B'cholani livol, because again he thought that I'd be able to have the relations and she wouldn't be a nida. So then says Rashi, havale shogeg ben aknisa ben aprisha. Then at that point already we would actually consider the person shogeg on the entry and on the separation. To havale lasuke adaite shemer tomer nitmesi, because already he should have considered maybe she'll become tameh. She'll say in the middle that I'm tameh. V'imeshamish be'aver meis ba'rayos chayev, and if, as we said in the previous amud, that tashmish, that an act of relations with an aver meis, the person is chayev. When the aver is soft, the person is chayev. So then kiparish be'aver meis nami, even if he waits and he separates until the aver is meis, he separates again only after it's soft. Nami nechayev, he should be chayev. She'ein kan onus, because it's no longer considered an onus anymore. If all of this should have occurred to him, because again we're talking about samach levesta, and so then it wouldn't have made sense to say, like Abaya said, that the separation ultimately is considered to be a situation of onus. You couldn't have said that unless you're saying b'shalo samach levesta. But the problem is, v'amar Abaya le'el, but Abaya said earlier, and this again, this is what Abaya said on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. We had a number of opinions that said this, on Masnisin on the Mishnah, Chayev Shtayim, that we're talking about actually two liabilities, both on the entry and on the exit. We already said in the previous Amud that you have to understand Abaya that we're talking that it is near the time of her period, and he's a Talmud Chacham. He knows the halacha in terms of entry. He doesn't know the halacha in terms of separation. Kidu Kimna La'el, as we said earlier, and so therefore again it's almost like a contradiction in terms of how Abaya understands the Mishnah. And Rashi continues and explains the answer. Ki itzmar di Abaya dechayev shtayim bi'alma itzmar. When Abaya said there's two liabilities, he was just saying in general you could have a situation of two liabilities. V'lava masnisin. He wasn't explaining the Mishnah over there. The ilu masnisin, because when it comes to the Mishnah, the kaven the maflik ben piresh be'aver meis lepiresh bekushi. Since the Mishnah is making a distinction between separating when the aver is meis and when the aver is hard, b'shalo samuch levesta askinan. So there, that distinction already already must be a situation where it's not near the time of the vest, it's not near the time of the period. And that's why we would say that if he's pirish be'aver mace, it's considered an onus, he's potter, and pirish bekushi chayiv. And then, as we said in the previous Amud, if he separates bekushi, he's going to be chayiv if he didn't wait. Why? Because again, it's the person really, what the person should do is separate with the lesser of the pleasures. And Rashi continues, and that which Abaye said before, chayiv shtayim, that the person is liable for two, that was just a general statement, milsa be'apei nafshi, independent, nothing to do with the Mishnah. V'achi Imra was just saying as follows, hameshamish im haTorah b'samuch levesta, in a situation where a person has relations with a woman who is pure and it's near the time of her period, v'shagag b'cholani livol, and he's considered shogeg because again he thought to himself, I'm able to have relations and she won't be tamei. V'amar lo nitzmeisi, and then she says in the middle that I'm tamei, chayiv shtayim, so then the person is liable to. There would actually be no distinction between how he separated to meshamish meis ba'arayos nami chayiv, because it happens to be that even meshamish meis ba'arayos is chayiv. That's still considered to be tashmish. It's still considered an act of relations, and this would all be considered in the category of liability of shogeg. And this person, even from the beginning, is shogeg in both of them. Over Talmud Chacham lazu v'lo lazu kedu kimnan. If you say that he's a Talmud Chacham for this and not for this, like we said, so then it's not considered to be all one lapse of awareness. As we said, there Abai was saying you can come up with that scenario where there are two liabilities. And the Gemara continues, Boy Minei Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosi ben Lakunya me Rabbi Shimon ben Yosi ben Lakunya. Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosi ben Lakunya asks Rabbi Shimon ben Yosi ben Lakunya the following question: Azhar labo al nida minayin. Where do we have a warning that a person is not allowed to have relations with a nida? Min haTorah. Where do we know that from the Torah? Shakal kola. So he took a clod of earth, pasak bein, he threw it at him. Azhar labo al nida. What do you mean a warning for a bo al nida? There's a pasuk v'alisha benidas tumas lo sikrav. It says you can't come close to a woman who's a nida. So Ella, rather, what the question is as follows: Azhara lemeshamish im hatahora. Where do we have a warning that if somebody's having relations with a woman who's pure, the amra lo nitmesi, and then she says to him that I am tamei de lo nifresh miyad, that he shouldn't separate immediately. Where do we know that from? In Nolan, from where? Where is the source for that? Amar Chizkiya says Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says utihini dasa olav. It says that the nida is upon him. And so therefore we understand from that pasuk, Usihini dasa olav, afilu b'shas nidasa, even at the time that she's becoming a nida, tei olav, it's upon him. And so therefore again you have this idea, again even in a situation where she says nitmesi in the middle. Eshkechon aseh, and so the Gemara says we find that there's a positive commandment, lo saseh minol, and where do we find the negative commandment for that? Amar Rapapa says Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says lo sikrav, it says a person's not supposed to become close. Lo sikrav nami lo sifrosh. The word lo sikrav can also mean lo sifrosh, meaning a language of separation, that again the person is not supposed to separate immediately. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, we find that the pasuk in Yeshayahu uses the word krav in that fashion. Ha'omrim krav elecha al tigash bi ki kidashtichen. And over there, the word krav over there, krav elecha, is really a language of separation. And Rashi explains, krav elecha means amod ba'atzmecha, means withdraw from yourself, hold yourself back. And Rashi explains the pasuk, Leitzane hador hayu omrim lenavi. This is where those who make mockery out of things, they were saying to the navi, amod bi'atzmecha al tiga bi. You should hold yourself, withdraw yourself, don't touch me. Shalo atamech, that I shouldn't make you tameh. Sha'ata kadosh v'ani tameh, because you are holy and I am tameh. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, V'hizartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasam. It says that you should separate Klal Yisrael from their tumah. Amar Rabbi Yoshi says, Mikan azhar levnei Yisrael. From here, there's a warning for b'nei Yisrael, sheyifreshu min nishosei and samach leveston, that they should separate from their wives near the time of their vest, the time of the expected period. The common, how much is that? Amar Rabba says, the Mesoras Hashas says that some say it's Rava. Ona, that refers to one time period. One time period would be a day, meaning daylight hours, let's say around 12 hours, or it could be a nighttime hours, again around 12 hours, that time period right before the vest is expected. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Kol she'ino porish me'ishto samach levesta, anyone who does not separate from his wife near the time of the expected period, afilo havyon lo bonim kivnei Aaron mesim, even if he has sons like the sons of Aaron, Aaron, they are going to die. The Chsiv is written, V'izartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasam. It says again they should separate. V'hadava b'nidasa talks about this idea of separation at the time of the vest. V'samachlei acharei mos, and then we have acharei mos. Again, that's the pasuk that mentions acharei mos shnei b'nei Aaron, after the sons of Aaron died. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol haporish me'ishto samach levesta. Anyone who does separate from his wife near the time of her vest, havin lo bonim zacharim, is going to have children that are males, is going to have boys. Techsiv, as it's written, lahavdil ben atame uven atar, talks about separating between tame and tar. V'samach leisha kisazriya v'yalda zachar, and nearby we have a pasuk about giving birth to a male. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, "Havin lo bonim ru'uyin lahora." He's going to have children that are fit to issue rulings. Techsiv, as it's written, lahavdilu lahoros. It talks again about lahoros, about issuing rulings, about being able to paskin. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kol hamavdil al hayayin b'motzoi Shabbos." Anyone who makes havdalah over wine on Motzei Shabbos, havin lo bonim zacharim, is going to have boys. Techsiv, as it's written, lahavdil ben hakodesh uven hachol. That's separation, meaning like havdalah. Uchsiv hasam lahavdil ben hatame uven hatar, and it also talks about separating between tame and tar. V'samachlei isha kisazriya, and nearby again it says isha kisazriya, the idea of bonim zacharim. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says bonim ru'uyin lahora. Again, as we said above, person's going to have sons that are fit to issue rulings, to paskin. Techsiv, as it's written, lahavdil lahoros. Again, it's written over there, lahoros, to be able to issue rulings. Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes says that Rabbi Elazar says, Kol mekadesh es atzmo b'shas tashmish. Anybody who's mekadesh himself, means to say he does it in a modest, private way, the time of having relations. When he has relations, he does it in a way of tznius. Havin lo bonim zacharim, he's going to have children that are males. Shenemar, as it says, v'eskadishtem v'yisam kedoshim. It says that you'll be kedoshim, v'samachlei isha kisazriya, and it says nearby again that the woman is going to give birth to a boy. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Rabbi Eliezer, the Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer Omer hasheretz v'nelam mimenu. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva said almost the same idea. They said that it's only by a lapse of awareness in terms of the tumah that we say there's a carbon, but not in situations where there's a lapse of awareness in terms of kodesh or mikdash. And the Gemara says, "My beinayu." So what's the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? They seem to be saying the same thing. Amar Chizkiya says, "Sheretz unevela ika beinayu." The difference between them is sheretz and nevela. Rashi explains sheretz and nevela, tamei sheretz v'tamei nevela. It means the person became tamei with a sheretz, or let's say tamei with a nevela. B'yadiyah shebetchila, meaning when in the original awareness of what happened, yada shenaga v'sheretz o b'nevela. He knew that he became tamei. He knew he touched either a sheretz or a nevela. Avalo yada be'ezamei and shag, but he didn't know exactly which one he touched. V'yosa tuma nelma keshach al kodesh. At the time that he ate the kodesh, he didn't know specifically the exact source of the tumah. That's the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, whether that qualifies as an awareness. Rabbi Eliezer savar ba'inan ad yoda I b'sheretz itmi I b'nevela itmi. Rabbi Eliezer says the person needs to know how he became tamei. Was it through a sheretz or nevela? Rabbi Akiva savar lo ba'inan ad yoda. The person, you don't need that the person knows exactly how he became tamei. The kaven the yoda the itma ba'olam, since he knows that there was tumah, that he became tamei. Lo tzarech I b'sheretz itmi I b'nevela itmi. He doesn't need to know exactly how he became tamei, whether it was a sheretz or whether it was through a nevela. V'chein amar Ula, and likewise Ula says sheretz and nevela ika beinayu. Again, the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is in this issue of sheretz and nevela. Does he need to know exactly how he became tamei? The Ula Rami Rabbi Eliezer ad Rabbi Eliezer, because Ula, he said there was actually a contradiction between Rabbi Eliezer within the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer and Mashani, and he answered that contradiction. He said as follows: Miyamar Rabbi Eliezer ba'inan ad yoda I b'sheretz itmi b'nevela itmi. Does Rabbi Eliezer really say that the person needs to know how he became tamei, whether it was through a sheretz or nevela? Or a mini, but we have the following contradiction. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Monav shach, either way you look at it, chaylev achal chayev, nosar achal chayev, Shabbos chilal chayev, Yom HaKippurim chilal chayev, ishtoni da boal chayev, achoso boal chayev. What difference does it make exactly how he's chayev? In all the cases, you're chayev. If a person ate chaylev, he's chayev. If he ate nosar, he's chayev. If he's mechal Shabbos, he's chayev. If he's mechal Yom Kippur, he's chayev. If he had relations with a nida, he's chayev. If he had relations with a sister, he's chayev. chayiv. That's what Rabbi Eliezer said. Amar lo Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Yoshua says to him, he says to Rabbi Eliezer, Hareyu Omer, Ohodai love chatoso asher chata bano. It says he has to know the exact sin. The person has to know exactly what the sin is. So here it seems Rabbi Eliezer is saying the exact opposite. You don't need to know exactly what the sin was. Rashi explains, Monifshach, Mishnahi Bekrisus. This is actually a Mishnah in Krisus. Chayla v'noser lefanav. Let's say there's Chayla v'noser in front of him. Achal echad mehen b'shog. He eats one of them by mistake. Ve'enu yodea eza man. He doesn't know which one. Or you could have the following case. V'shavas v'yom ha'kippurim. V'shavas en yom kippur. Asa malacha be'echad mehen. He did malacha on one of them. Ve'enu yodea be'eza man. He doesn't know which one he did malacha on. Or you could have the following case. Ishto nida v'achosu imo b'bayis. His wife was a nida and his sister is with him in the house. Shogag bi'achas mehen. He made a mistake with one of them having relations. He didn't know which one. In all of these cases, Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatas. Rabbi Eliezer says chayev chatas. Rabbi Yoshua poter, and Rabbi Yoshua says exempt. Rabbi Eliezer monavshach, and that's what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. We monavshach. What's the difference? Either way is chayev. So who cares if he knows exactly what the aveira was? And again, that seems to contradict Rabbi Eliezer above, that he needs to know exactly what the source of the tumah was. And again, that is the question that Ula asked in terms of the contradiction within Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara now continues, Umeshani. And so then Ula answered as follows. Hasam asher chota vehevi amar achmana. There it says he sins and he brings the carbon. Chet kolshu means to say any kind of sin. It doesn't have to be that he knows exactly. But over here, mechti, let us see, ksiv, it's written, b'chol davar tamei, o benivlatz sheretz tamei, something tamei, or nevela sheretz tamei, lamali, what does it need to say that extra phrase for? Shmamina ba'inan ad diyoda, i b'sheretz itmi, b'nevela itmi. By saying that extra phrase of o benivlatz sheretz tamei, what it's saying is he has to know whether it was through a sheretz that he became tamei, or whether it was through nevela. Rabbi Akiva responds to that, Aidi, since. And Rashi explains, Asher chota v'hevi amar achmana. Again, it says Asher chota v'hevi, learns out from that pasuk. Rabbi Yoshua learns out from that pasuk. You have to know exactly what the sin is. Ohodai love chatos Asher chota ba v'hevi. That's the full pasuk. V'hai ba de kadarish Rabbi Yoshua. Now this word ba that Rabbi Yoshua is darshaning, ma'apik le Rabbi Eliezer l'kaman b'shmaitin l'drasha achrin. Rabbi Eliezer is going to further on in the sugi. Rabbi Eliezer is going to use it for a different drasha, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yotes Amud Aleph.